A huge bomb is dropped on this season by new housewife Noella in this jam-packed episode 3 of The Real Housewives of Orange County, season 16. This episode is titled Gone Guy. Now, before we jump into the recap and our reactions, which I will read from the live chat as they come in, for those of you who are new, my name is Nick Zengel. Thank you so much for being here. So let's actually start and jump right in to this episode with Shannon storms Beador at her Aesthetician's office for her filler dissolving appointment. Now, she points out how last year she put 6 vials of filler in her face and everything plumped up as a result from there, to the point where she says she actually could not even recognize herself. And I wondered what was going on there, because it did seem kind of weird that her face was so plumped up, but her body was not like that, where she kind of gained weight a few seasons back. But anyways, before getting injected to remove the prior injections, new housewife Noella Bergener arrives all smiles to hang out / comfort Shannon as she is getting this work done. Now, we learned last week's FaceTime between Shannon and Noella that we saw was a FaceTime that we saw as a debriefing of Heather Dubrow's mess of a party that went down the episode before. But we also saw in this episode some unseen footage of Shannon inviting Noella to this appointment. So now, as Shannon is getting injected, Noella has her hands of comfort on Shannon, and you can see here that on her legs, and she points out that her husband, Sweet James, is the one who kind of comforts her normally when she is getting her filler done. And we also get close-ups of the needle going into Shannon's face, where Noella, like many of us as seen here, was cringing at that moment of watching that. So we are now with Noella as Shannon made that comment about not being a needle person. Sorry for that brief pause. She then opens up, Noella, about her experience with needles regarding IVF, in vitro fertilization, where she shares that she actually miscarried once on her own, then had a surrogate with her son, and then miscarried again with twin boys with another surrogate. And after this, Shannon gives her condolences after she shares on those hardships, where Noella then expresses her gratitude for, or I should say, Noella expresses her gratitude for having her one son, despite the curveball of his autism diagnosis. Now, this leads to Noella sharing more in her confessional about her son's diagnosis at 18 months after his speech progress ended, and he regressed on that front. And although she said she never thought she would be in this position to be the mom of an autistic son, she is also very proud at the same time to be the mom of an autistic son. So we keep going, and after opening up about her motherhood journey, as Shannon is rising from her seat with her mask on like a mummy, as you see here, Noella then receives what she called an exciting text message with information that's exciting to her, kind of in a sarcastic tone, about her house in Puerto Rico, which she describes as more of a nuisance lately because this house has been the source of problems in her life and in her marriage in particular, stemming from Noella's shock after finding out about her husband, Sweet James's tax debt. Now, Noella says at first she thought it was only one tax lien of $4 million. Then a few days later, she actually found out it was 2 liens, closer to $6 million, which she says has really impeded on her trust within her marriage. And Shannon, in her confessionals, shares her worry for Noella's marriage after recounting how her and David, how their marriage was, how their story went as played out on this very show. Now, Shannon then at the office with Noella shares her trust issues stemming from her previous marriage, which gives Shannon an in to bring up Heather's party, which triggered, according to Shannon, more trust issues. Shannon then makes it a point to thank Noella for supporting her after everything went down at Heather's, where Shannon shares she was excited about rekindling the friendship with Heather and was hurt by Gina and Emily because they had grown closer recently. Now, Shannon asks Noella if she has spoken with Nicole lately, who was the subject of the suing Terry Dubrow plotline, where Noella says Nicole had good things to say about Shannon going into that party, but is not so sure about Shannon and how she feels about her now after the party. But Noella says she thinks it's nothing that can't be fixed with a lunch. So then Shannon or over lunch, I should say. So Shannon in her confessional says she feels bad for Nicole too in this case, but is also asking, what were you thinking, Nicole, having this information, knowing this about yourself related to Terry, and not making it known to your friend Heather? Which I think the same question could be asked to Shannon on why she didn't tell Heather, but we'll hold that thought for now. But Shannon and Noella wrap up this appointment with Shannon accepting Noella's offer to be a moderator at the lunch with Nicole. Now, there's not much to say yet on this opening scene because this story is going to unfold throughout the rest of this episode, but let's just continue on and we'll get to my thoughts in a few seconds. And if you have any thoughts in the chat or in the comment section, make sure to leave them there. And we are now with Dr. Jen and her son. She asked him about how his junior lifeguards went, which is basically just a summer program for kids and lifeguards on the beach, kind of learning water safety and water things. And I think they jump off the pier at the end of their camp or whatever, and they just have fun. But anyways, and do conditioning. But Jen is also recapping upcoming events with him of lots of visitors from the family coming over very soon, which he seems to be exhausted hearing this. And then Jen's husband, Ryan, calls on FaceTime from Hawaii where he is working. And he seems to have the same sentiment as her son regarding lots of visitors who are coming to their house after Ryan gets back home. Now, Jen clarifies in her confessional, she basically married her mom. He has a lot of the same traits as her mom. And we get another Mr. Puppers focus. There will be more with Jen a little later that I have more thoughts on. But let's just keep going to another couple who you're checking in with, which is Gina and Travis at the townhome, which, side note, I think it's a very nice townhome. And I think the others who are mocking her for the size of it and whatnot should take a note out of Nicole James's playbook and say, have a seat. So they are catching up on their day over a wine and a charcuterie board, saying that it is nice, which is a theme this season. I guess those are more common now. But anyways, saying that it's kind of nice for once to not have the kids in the house. But Gina then shares how she has invited Noella to cryotherapy, but wonders if Noella was actually hitting on Gina, her, at Heather's party. And we get some clips inserted from that night in it and how it wouldn't be far-fetched knowing Noella is bisexual. But I'll have a few thoughts on that in a second. But Travis then jokes with Gina saying, oh, are you wanting her to hit on you? And although Gina kind of says, of course not, they do joke saying, well, she does have a jet. And to that, I'd add, she has a jet for now, knowing what we are about to find out. But anyways, they then talk about how it is nice to be able to joke around about these things. And they talk about being happy and not wanting to rush into an engagement. And Gina says, well, I wake up every day happy until someone pisses me off, cueing her venting about Shannon. Now, Gina and Travis agree Shannon likes to control things. And Gina says she still has this soft spot for Shannon because she helped her out over the past few years when Gina was in a tough spot in her life. Then we get flashbacks to Shannon recommending a better attorney to Gina when she had the whole DUI situation happen. Now, all that, even though Shannon tried to put the entire Nicole Terry lawsuit mess on Gina, which she says her trying to do the right thing for someone she has been a friend to, then to turn on her like that made her very upset because it was a shot at her integrity. And in her confessional says Shannon is so worried about looking good that she does not care who she hurts in the process. Travis then ends this whole scene and conversation with saying Heather, someone that Gina just met, seems to understand Gina better than Shannon, who is someone she's known for many, many years. So let's react to this and leave any thoughts you have in the chat, and I will be reading them in a few seconds. So Gina is pointing out how she feels Shannon turned on her by kind of saying all these things behind her back. But I think we can also say that Gina also kind of turned on Shannon by not keeping the promise of not telling about the lawsuit even as messy as Shannon was being by bringing it up in the first place, but not wanting people to say anything. And even though I think Gina did the right thing by telling Heather sooner rather than later, I still think it can work both ways. I think they both kind of betrayed each other. But let me know what you think of Gina's take in the comments. But also, I'm wondering now that Noella will be single, and we'll find out in a few seconds that it'll all kind of, the whole bomb will drop. But will she try to embrace her bisexuality by attempting to do anything with a fellow cast member? I think they may be planting the seed with that. This scene with Gina talking about it for us, but maybe not. And I'm not sure at this point if Gina even knows Noella is bisexual. So I think it was interesting Gina even thought it was flirting, or maybe she kind of got a heads up by one of the other girls or by the producer or someone. But anyways, let's keep going. So we now see Heather is visiting Terry at his office and reminiscing about after seeing a photo hanging on the walls from almost a decade ago, they said. Heather seems worried she doesn't look as good, but Terry seems to think he looks better for some reason. Now, Heather then shares with Terry that Nicole called her on her way over, where Nicole was really, really sorry about what happened at the party. But Heather said, according to the footage, to Nicole that she doesn't think any less of Nicole as a friend after that. Heather then shares the text exchange between her and Shannon, where Heather declines to meet with Shannon, basically saying Shannon needs to take accountability before they can move on. Where Heather then shares she thinks Shannon didn't like her from the beginning for some reason. And we get a flashback to earlier seasons of the show where Heather and Shannon kind of got off to a rocky start and all their issues. But Heather then questions Shannon's attitude of, I'm never wrong, it's never my fault, which I think is a good question. But on the Terry and Heather looks front, I don't really see what Terry sees in himself looking better than 10 years ago. Maybe he was joking. I don't know. But I think he actually looks older, more wrinkly, and his skin doesn't look that great either. And also Heather, I think at least she's self-aware about it. But I don't know. I expect more from a plastic surgeon who says he also uses Botox to not look like that. Plus, I thought from certain angles, Heather actually, her face looked like it was almost indented on her cheeks somehow. So, I don't know. But also, I was going to say it shouldn't really matter what people look like, right? But the problem is they're in the beauty space, meaning Terry is a surgeon or a plastic surgeon, and Heather and him, from my understanding, still own a skincare line. And so you are held to a different standard, and people are a little more critical of you when you kind of enter those spaces. So that's one thing I was kind of a little taken off by when they joined the show. And as far as Heather just brushing off Nicole James' lawsuit talks, I find it hard to believe it wouldn't trigger someone as smart as Heather, or someone who portrays himself as smart as Heather, to start questioning that she wouldn't start questioning Nicole having other things that she's hiding that could affect Terry and Heather. And maybe Heather is just brushing it off because she thinks more is coming out regarding Nicole, or she's giving her enough rope to hang herself. Or maybe she doesn't want to look any more stupid than this situation already has her and Terry looking. I don't know, but I can't imagine a friendship not being affected if it was revealed someone sued my spouse years into our friendship. Kind of suspicious in my opinion, but maybe that's the Hollywood elite circle way of doing things, or Heather isn't really friends with Nicole. I don't know. We'll have to watch what happens and see if any more comes out of this. But now to Noella and Gina, who are now at Cryotherapy, where Gina brings up the article that came out that made headlines about the tax issues of Noella's husband, where Noella says when she found out about this, she suggested to her husband selling the Puerto Rico home to pay off the tax debt and then be done with that and move on, which appears that James, her husband, is pushing back on, causing what she's called a breakdown in communication. And speaking of breakdown, in this scene, Noella starts breaking down with emotions over this, which indicates to me either she's been bottling up more regarding her marriage than just this issue, or she's been ignoring other red flags that she can't ignore anymore, or maybe she is completely blindsided by this rift. I don't know. Or they're just not as connected from a marriage point as we thought, and so this argument was one of few and it just sent them over the edge. I don't know, but I thought it was interesting how quickly she is unraveling in front of us. But after Gina comforts Noella, saying she knows how it feels to be blindsided by things, we've seen that play out on the show. And after they go into the cryotherapy machine chamber, whatever it's called, which allegedly releases endorphins once you get out of the cold. And Noella makes it a point to point out how the cold is going up into her vaginal area, while also saying being cold to her is one of her high list of things she hates. So if she's being cold for you and risking what she calls her nips, meaning nipples or boobs, whatever, then that must mean she's a good friend to you, or she thinks you're a good friend, which I thought was an interesting thing. But Noella also volunteers how the night before she fell asleep in her sex dungeon. And this is Gina's face when she's looking kind of puzzled at Noella bringing this up, like, what's going on here? But let's react about that. So about the sex dungeon, I am not sure in this scene how or why Noella brought this up, other than to show off, because in this case it seemed a little out of place in the conversation, unless they wanted just to use Gina's reactions. They thought it was a good like facial expression for some reason, and they're like, let's get this in somehow, so we'll fit it in there. Maybe even with just the context of trying to piece together endorphins with cryotherapy and endorphins with sex dungeon. I don't know. I was trying to figure that out, but it's just funny how they keep bringing that up. But as far as, I did laugh at Gina's reaction, because I think to us normal people, meaning people who don't have a sex dungeon or don't know anybody with one, I think that's kind of how most people would react if it came up in casual conversation. But on a more serious note, I do think Noella's take and suggestion to her husband about the tax issues of just sell the house, solve the issue, and move on makes sense. I think any logical person with any ability to add or subtract, and especially if they're as well off as she thinks they are, what would be the problem with selling a house? And we'll find out more about that house later. But I just think it's weird that her husband is so against that. But we'll table that discussion for now. But anyways, let's keep going. If you have any thoughts in the chat, leave them, and we will talk about them in another break. But anyways, Shannon is now on her way to the Nicole and Noella lunch, chatting with the driver about the place they're going to. But then Gina calls her on the phone, where Gina invites Shannon, I should say, to sit down to work out their issues. And Shannon says, okay, and randomly notices she forgot her belt. Anyways, we are now with Emily and her husband and their kids in their backyard for a barbecue, where Shane, her husband, seen here, shares he will be receiving his bar paperwork packet because he passed the bar finally. And Emily actually seems more excited Shane passed the bar than Emily, which is not shocking, because we've seen this over the years that he's kind of like, whatever, kind of laissez-faire, kind of not really super into things. But we learned from Emily that Shane didn't even tell his mom right away when he graduated college, indicating that he has a pattern of not really being quick to share exciting, monumental life news in general, especially with people in his life. So not really shocking. But the conversation then opens up at the table with their kids, between Shane and Emily, talking about religion with their daughter, who's the one that we learned last episode is going to be baptized. And Emily explains to her kids what she shared last episode with us regarding her shift in mindset on the religious front, where their daughter asks a legitimate question of, what if in 10 years I don't want to be baptized anymore? And I think they were smart to kind of table that conversation for now, to not let their young child kind of go in this rabbit hole of deep thinking and kind of letting her life spiral out of control. But to this, I wanted to say, I have a lot of respect for how Emily and her husband talk to their kids, and especially about this topic. And I can imagine they are giving courage to a lot of viewers out there who maybe want or need to have similar conversations in their lives, but are hesitant to do so. And I also think it is very interesting that Emily is supporting her kids going into the Mormon church, Mormon religion, when we have another Housewives franchise on Bravo, the Salt Lake City franchise, openly panning that same religion and basically going in the complete opposite direction of leaving the church. And when I was watching this, or I was watching Salt Lake City too, I actually saw on screen, I was like, I know that person who was on screen. I won't say exactly who it was, but the scene maybe I'll talk about at some point. But someone who was featured on the show who I actually grew up with in Orange County, which is where I'm from, not too far from where Emily and her family are. And so I was wondering if Shane and the kids go to the same church, the Mormon church that I actually grew up not too far from. So I'm curious to kind of see if this unfolds and if some more information comes out about where they go. Obviously, I don't want to dox them and like expose where they go, but I just, for my own knowledge, I want to know. But anyways, on a lighter note, I just wanted to say, as someone who grew up in that area, there was nothing like an outdoor barbecue in your backyard in Southern California on a mild spring summer evening. And so this kind of brought me back to my childhood, having a similar kind of dinner as they had when I was growing up. Anyways, now to Noella, Shannon and Nicole lunch, where Noella arrives first, followed by Nicole, where they have a pre-Shannon arrival meeting with Nicole saying she is open to what Shannon will say. Then Noella seems frustrated still with her husband upon Nicole asking how he's doing, where Nicole shares she is going through a divorce right now, prompting Noella to quickly say, well, divorce isn't an option for us right now. That's not even on the table. Where Nicole kind of clarifies she meant she's relating from a relationship standpoint, not necessarily Nicole thinking or advocating for Noella to get a divorce. But the fact that Noella quickly reassures Nicole that she is not getting a divorce, to me indicates she was blindsided by this. But also, clearly, that the marriage already had problems that may have been one-sided. Maybe James, her husband, was the only one who had issues with what was going on. I don't know. But I also have a theory that I will share in a moment after Noella shares more later in the episode. But let's keep going. So Shannon then arrives a little late and says she isn't doing so great and jumps right into apologizing to Nicole about what happened at Heather's party, followed by a but, and then she tries to explain why she was confused, why Heather and Nicole would still be friends if Nicole sued Terry, which I think we all agree is kind of confusing. But Nicole says there's never a time or a place to bring up something like that, prompting Noella to clarify even further that it wasn't even a lawsuit situation. It was a non-suit, which I thought was a smart term that she apparently coins. And Nicole then wonders why anybody else would even care about this situation, considering it's about her body and Terry and his practice. And Nicole says she felt attacked by Emily and Gina, followed by Shannon saying she takes the blame for trusting Emily and Gina with this information. And Nicole says she forgives Shannon because she senses her sincerity. Shannon then shares with Noella and Nicole that Heather has no interest in speaking with her after they ask her how she's doing with Heather. And in her confessional, Shannon seems to think she is the only one owning her part in this, and seems to think Gina is the only person that ruined Heather's party. I have a feeling that comment won't age well, considering Shannon was the source of that information towards Gina. And if she hadn't told Gina and Emily, that wouldn't have come out at the party. But anyways, Shannon ends this scene with saying she thought Heather and her picked up right where they left off and doesn't know now where her friendship with Gina and Emily goes from here. Now, I thought it was interesting. Shannon seemed to think she would be friends with Heather again and not think what she was saying about Nicole regarding this lawsuit wouldn't get back to Heather. And we said this last week when the lawsuit story blew up in Heather's party, of Shannon finally having her manipulative chess-playing game catch up to her. And now she is on the defense, which I know some in the comments of last week's Recap and React didn't like how early that was being exposed in the season. But I want to know the truth, so the earlier the better for me, so we can watch the fallout unfold on camera the whole season rather than wait to address it at the reunion or have it play out in the media or in interviews about the show and not actually on the show. So I actually like that fourth wall broken, even though they weren't super fourth wall-y, if it makes sense. They weren't like directly referencing the show, but you can kind of imply it with what we were watching, which I think is good because some viewers probably have no idea what that they're referencing kind of a game that's played on these shows. But anyways, let's keep going. Actually, let me hold on one second and grab a sip of water, and then we'll be right back. All right. We are now back with Dr. Jen again, this time with her husband dropping off her mom and daughter from the airport. We see a fun handshake between grandmother and granddaughter, and then Jen and her mother are outside talking about her late father, who Jen wonders if he would be proud of her. And Jen then shares how her father passed away from a motorcyclist who was going the wrong way on a one-way street and hit her father, who was on his bike, and kind of sent him flying, and he was in kind of a concussion, and he ended up succumbing to his injuries. And that happened, from what she says, one day before she was taking her exam to get into med school. Jen then says something that I actually found very poignant, in that when she gets sad about her dad being gone, she reminds herself how grateful she is to have had something so special to be able to even miss. Because a lot of people that are estranged from their parents, when they pass, they don't really have that connection to look back on. Jen also shares, growing up, she didn't talk about a lot of things with her mom and her family. But after her father's death, her mom was really depressed, and resulted in Jen having many formative years after med school and after starting her life alone, trying to navigate life and what comes as a result of establishing yourself, whether it's buying a house or having kids or getting married. And so I thought that was very, very touching of her to open up about that. And I actually thank Jen, even though she's probably not watching this, for opening up about her father and her grieving process, because I'm going to keep that tool and that phrase and that kind of mindset in my back pocket to use and share when grieving myself or when I'm helping others grieve. Because I know it sounds like her mother really thought that was beautiful, the way she stated that, and kind of gave her a little optimism. So I think that was really nice that they shared that. But now we have a quick jump to another serious thing, which is Shannon storms Beador's home, where she is FaceTiming Noella, where Noella drops the bombshell of the season again, after another bombshell at the beginning of the season, that she was just served divorce papers to a shocked Shannon, as you see here. Now, Noella says she doesn't know where her husband James went, considering everything of his is still at their home and his life is all still here, kids, wife, business, whatnot. And she said that he shut off all the credit cards. So, she'll touch more on that in a second, but she says that she was served with papers from Puerto Rico. Remember, that's the house that they were just talking about. And that her nanny was the one that had to translate the document from Spanish to English for her. And Noella says in her confessional that she feels lost. She doesn't know what to do or to think, and she's just trying to figure out what is next for her with her lawyer, and that she knew he made a mistake with the taxes, but she didn't think this would be the end of their marriage. And Shannon kind of tries to ask her, like, are you trying to reason with him, to try to save your family, try to get him to come back and to not do this? But Noella wasn't really responsive, but she basically says that she needs a rest from things happening, because her son was just diagnosed with autism in June, and in July her mom was hospitalized, and now this. So the scene kind of ends on a lighter note, which I don't know if they meant to do this or they're just trying to transition to the next scene, which is a lighter scene. But the scene ends with Shannon asking her, wait, he lives in Puerto Rico? Because she, I guess, didn't get that part at the front, which is kind of weird, because we'll find out later that he is not from Puerto Rico. He's from, or I'll just share that now, he's from Salt Lake City, Utah, I guess. So it's like, it doesn't even make sense why he would go there or why he's so attached to that place. But anyways, I have to say, I am very surprised actually how early in the season this is coming up. Like I said, the last 2 episodes, I'm glad they're actually getting right into the main storylines this season. And I actually can't believe it's only been 3 episodes so far because they've packed a lot in this season already, which I'm very happy about. Excuse me. But it also makes me wonder if Noella not showing her husband early on was by design, by him. Or maybe she went along with it knowing he works a lot and that was kind of the cover for it. And this is kind of her thing, which is, I think, common in a lot of the housewife worlds, where they kind of, these high-ranking, powerful men get their wives on this show, and then that's kind of an out for them to divorce, so they have this platform to be on their own without them doing much. I don't know, but maybe she didn't know there was problems, and she kind of played along kind of blindly. I don't know. But we did see both of them filming 2 seasons ago at Vicky Gunvalson's engagement party. So a little strange, but I'm sure more will come out this season and at the reunion, but we'll table that for now. So now we are back with everyone. Heather is recording her podcast, this time with guests Jamie Lynn Sigler, who's an actress, and Lance Bass, who we know from NSYNC and media and hosting. And Dr. Jen, or Emily's with her kids and her dogs. Dr. Jen is giving a dude some jaw injections, and Gina is arriving to meet up with Shannon, who actually arrived first this time. But before we dive into the last scene, I wanted to talk about Heather and Terry. And more particular, Heather showing her podcast recording, reminding me of a theory brought up by Dana Wilkie, who you might remember that name because she was a friend of the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. I think it was season 2. And she has her own YouTube channel now called Deca Dish with Dana Wilkie. And in her Orange County recap recently, she was mentioning how she thinks Heather and Terry came on the show to actually promote their products, whether that be Terry's practice or Terry's show Botched on E, or their skincare line, or Heather's podcast, or her daughter's podcasts and products, or the house, which according to Dana may be pocket listed for sale already right now that they got this exposure on the show and Heather's YouTube channel where she goes in depth on the detailed tour. So I think it could be a good theory. Outside of Heather saying publicly, which is kind of a fake, I think, facade of why she actually came back to the show, of her reasoning being, oh, I wanted to show our family's new normal and blah, 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 blah. Wanting us to think that she isn't in it for the money or attention at all, which is not true. But this comment by Dana makes sense to me because clearly they don't need the money. And if you have money, why would you want to be on reality TV unless the exposure could be leveraged for some other reasons, even if that is more money or relevance or gaining legitimacy in these other areas of your lives and careers and other business ventures. Just a thought. Let me know what you think in the chat or in the comments, wherever you're tuning in from. But Gina then starts by acknowledging the heaviness of the day regarding the news about Noella after they order drinks. And Gina says she got a FaceTime from Noella about the divorce filing and says she feels good that she is in a place to be a friend to Noella at this time now that she's on the other side of her issues with her relationships and marriage and whatnot. Now, Shannon then tells Gina that she got a FaceTime as well, which we already saw that FaceTime. And Gina shares that incident put things into perspective regarding her and Shannon's issues, leading to Shannon actually FaceTiming Noella at the table, inviting her to join them at the restaurant just to get her out of the house. Now, after Noella agrees to join, Shannon and Gina start hashing out their issues, and Shannon shares that she wanted to believe her, Gina, and Emily would have each other's backs regarding the lawsuit story. But that leads to Gina explaining what she explained to Heather at that lunch last episode about why this triggered her regarding her own husband's affair. Shannon then says, well, my husband cheated too, to which Gina was like, here you go again, trying to argue that you're right and making it about yourself. And then Shannon says, well, I've gone out of my way to be nice to you, where Gina makes a good point saying, if you're actually a nice person, You don't have to go out of your way to be nice. Gina then brings up Shannon telling Heather not to trust Gina and Emily, where Shannon says, well, that's because of the incident at Heather's party, where Gina then hits back again saying, well, you've been talking shit about us behind our backs. And then we get a commercial break to kind of give us a breather as this scene escalates, only to return to them saying how they're sad about this left turn in their friendship after getting close recently. And they both agree that they are so happy in their lives and their relationships that this rift isn't going to help in any of that. So let's get back on track. Right after that, Noella arrives and shares how the shutting off of the credit cards was a big no-no for her regarding her husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, because she is taking care of their son. Noella then shares in her confessional she does not have a bank account with savings. She doesn't have access to any other lines of credit, and that's all because her husband was in control of her family's finances, saying she has more questions than answers at this point, which is not a safe place for her to be in. Followed by Gina and Emily offering their support for her because they've gone through divorces. And Noella then reiterates her story about recommending to her husband to sell the Puerto Rico house that they had for only 7 months, we're learning now, to take care of the IRS issues. And she said she didn't think it was a big deal since they only owned the house for 7 months. Get rid of this issue and then move on. And this episode ends with Noella taking a shot of liquor. But let's get into more thoughts on this whole episode and this scene, and leave any thoughts you have in the chat, and we will go through them and read them and see what you are saying. But first, I think Gina is right about the comment from Shannon saying she's going out of her way to be kind is kind of weird, because it is actually something I've noticed in others in my real life and had to kind of, and myself to kind of consciously stop saying that and just start doing it. Meaning if you are saying, I'm a kind person, just be a kind person, and then it will show. You don't have to tell people. I think it's also similar to the, to be honest, or in all sincerity, that Ramona Singer from New York used to say all the time. And to me, it's like that thing, if you have to be that forward and reassuring someone that you are something, then you're probably subconsciously knowing that you're not that person, and you know the person isn't buying what you're selling them, basically. But anyways, I'm actually dealing with this in my real life offline right now, where someone's kind of blowing smoke up my butt, telling me how great I am and how much they respect my opinion and input, but their actions speak otherwise. So anyways, I digress on that. But as far as Noella, the divorce, I think, might have been prompted by James not liking her speaking up regarding the house and recommending doing something, even though the asset, from according to her, was in both their names. Because I think she did say in episode 1, when she was kind of listing the things that she contributes to the marriage, kind of as the strong woman standing behind the successful man, which it might have been a joke, but all the things she listed were not money, investment, or brains related. Even though it appears that her husband could benefit from her suggestions regarding investments or money or her own thoughts and brain, which I thought her recommendation made sense. If I was in that position, I probably would listen to her, but maybe there's other things going on. But anyways, I also think maybe their relationship was an agreement of what she explained regarding the finances. And now she is paying the price for what that entails by being left with nothing at this point. And we will see what comes out about this, or if there's any divorce settlement, or if they had a prenup or whatnot. But she's lucky she's on the show, because now she has a platform. But anyways, overall, this episode, I like, and last episode I thought this too, that the relationships of these housewives, emphasis on the wives part, and their spouses are being focused on, or their partners. And I think that can be attributed to the drama from the men over the last few seasons of the franchise. But even though I'm sure the women were probably could do without some of that drama, because it's real life drama. But and some of those examples were Emily's husband and his kind of attitude the first season she was on, and Gina's ex and her legal issues, Shannon's ex and new boyfriend challenges, and then the Heather lawsuit, of course. But I just wanted to say that, because some of these franchises where like no one on the cast is divorced, or everyone on the cast is divorced and single, sometimes it's not as good as if there's some marriages and relationships and kind of the men are put in the middle and start some of the drama, and the storyline kind of intertwines with the couples, even though the women are the front and center and the stars. But anyways, let me know what you think of that. But that wraps up the recap and react. I have a few programming notes and a few things to let you know before you leave. So before you leave, make sure to do whatever you got to do wherever you are tuning in, whether you're here live or on a replay on whatever platform. Do what you have to do on that platform to show some love for this episode, whether it's a thumbs up or a Rumble or punching bag on Rumble, or rating this if you're listening on the podcasting platforms, or if you're on Parler, giving it a echo or a upvote. And if wherever platform you're watching or listening from, make sure to do what you got to do to make sure you don't miss another episode, whether that's a subscribe or a follow or saving this on your podcasting platform, or subscribing, like I said before, on Rumble or YouTube. Make sure to do that, or following on Parler. Make sure to do that. And one programming note is, this is my last stream of 2021. So we will be returning with 2 recaps and reacts for Real Housewives of Orange County on Sunday, January 2nd, 2022. The times will come out in the next couple of weeks. So after the episodes air on Wednesday of next week and the week after, I will schedule those live streams with the time and the date. That way you can set a reminder and be there. But just know Sunday evening, Pacific time, we'll have 2 live streams to catch up on the 2 episodes for the end of the year before the first episode of the new year airs. And then we'll be back on our Thursday at this time, same place, regular schedule. So I want to thank you so much for this year and for this joining me this time for 2021. And I hope you have a happy and safe and healthy last 2 weeks of 2021. And with that said, I will see you in 2022 with our stream kickoff and a brand new year. So with that said, if you don't have any other thoughts in the chat, thank you so much for joining me, and I will talk to you next year. Bye-bye.